Let's talk about how Mirio can overcome Eraserhead and Overhaul. These are two very bad matchups for Mirio, and they're also two incredibly popular characters that will see a lot of play at Gen Con next week and a lot of play at almost every major regional for the rest of the season, and possibly at nationals as well. One strategy that you might have as a Mirio player is to say, easy, I plan to just not play them. You know, these regionals typically have 200 plus participants. Most participants in this game like to play their favorite character instead of maybe the best character. And, you know, you're only going to play 8 rounds and then top cuts. So you might say, well, in those 8 rounds, there's a good chance I just won't see them. I don't think that's the case, though, with Eraserhead and Overhaul, especially if you want to actually win the regional. I think Overhaul will probably be one, you know, he's going to see major play. He's going to be either the most played character or the second most played character, in my opinion, at Gen Con. I think he's only going to get more popular as time goes on. We saw at the Webcam RLE 13 overhauls. 2 overhauls made top cuts. 3 lost on their win-in match in the final round. We saw 9 Eraserheads. 3 Eraserheads made top cuts. Of those 3, 2 made it to top 4. And, of course, Jose won with Death Eraserhead the entire regional. So if you want to win the regional, I don't think you can plan on just not playing these characters. I think you have to be ready, and I think we're going to have to strategize and apply our intellect to overcome these matchups. And when I say overcome these matchups, I'm not saying make it heavily in your favor. I'm saying make it not heavily against you. For example, if you have like a 25% win chance against Eraserhead, let's just take it to a 40%. That can make all the difference. And then you just need, you know, fundamentally this is a card game. So then you just need a few things to swing your way and you've got the game. Okay, let's first focus on Eraserhead. What makes Eraserhead so powerful against against Mirio, how Mirio can combat Eraserhead, and then we'll switch to Overhaul for just a short minute. Overhaul will be much shorter. And then we'll review a list of what I would do if I was going to Gen Con next week, which sadly I'm not. But if I was, how would I change my Mirio list with the expectation that these two characters will be prevalent? All right, I am talking faster than I'm thinking. But Eraserhead is a horrible matchup for Mirio because he can give everything -2 speed, and he gets access to Erase, which is a 1 mid breaker block, and he can turn off Mirio so that he keeps the attacks mid because Mirio likes to be greedy. Mirios like to play Valiant Assault and Hardened Jab, which are only 3 speed and they're mid attacks. So if Eraserhead turns off Mirio and then takes 2 speed away, these are just free blocks. And Eraserhead's just getting these free breaker 1 blocks. And even if, you know, Eraserhead can't use Erase on every single attack, of course, it comes at the cost of a card in hand. But Eraserhead also gets access to Tape to change it back to mid. He gets access to Unbreakable on Death and Void to where a half block is okay, counts as a full block, and he gets access to Spooky. I can't talk today. He gets access to Spooky, where he basically gets a free block because he can take the speed down by 2, wait for Mirio to pump the damage, and then he can just commit Spooky and say, switch that speed and damage. I'll take 1 or 2 damage, and that's it. And then there's some other cards that make Eraserhead very powerful. We have Learning to Harden and Mediator that allow us to draw cards on defense. We have Instant Shining Flash, which is going to be discarding Mirio's momentum constantly. So all of these things together kind of make this matchup just horrible for Mirio. But it's one that he can't ignore because Eraserhead is, I think, unquestioningly one of the best characters in the game. And so we can't just ignore it. We have to do something. So what can we do? Well, one thing Mirio could do is play some off-zone punches and not be so greedy by playing all mid attacks. That's one of the benefits that Mirio gets, is that all the great good punches are mid attacks, and so Mirio can overcome that weakness. But one thing we could do is at least sprinkle in some off-zone punches. We don't have to have our entire lineup full of off-zone punches and slams, but we can at least sprinkle some in. So we still get great attacks like Hardened Chop, which can really jive with Hardened Jab by building us cards in our stage from our deck. We get cards like Bad Guy Roundup, which could be really powerful in a Mirio mirror match as well. But it draws you a card, and it discards a momentum, and it has powerful too. And it has a 2 high block, so you could kind of replace Valiant Assault if you wanted to with Bad Guy Roundup or Hardened Jab. Take your pick. You get BMI Buster, where you get to draw 2 and build 2, but it comes at the cost of 2 momentum. We'll talk about how we can get momentum against Eraserhead here in just a little bit. We got, of course, Texas Smash for maximum damage. And so there's good options on the off zone. So we don't have to just play this mid-attack only lineup. We also could play Mirio's 1 diff, which was not in a lot of the Mirio lists that topped the webcam RLE, but I think it's a must-have in any Mirio's going to Gen Con. I think you absolutely have to be playing at least a few copies main board of this foundation. It says flip, change the zone of your puncher's slam attack, it gets +1 speed. So that if Eraserhead uses a tape and makes it mid or turns you off, you can then keep it in the off zone. And then the big 3, we get the nice deadlock enhance. Or we could just play attacks with more speed and try to overcome the speed hate that Eraserhead gets. So we can, there's a lot of good punches that have 5 or more speed. You have Setup Strike, which is, if you use everything, it's basically 9 speed. Plummeting Punch is going to be 2 speed once you flip a foundation. Heroic Strike is only 4 speed, but it's going to commit down gets heavy stun. Phantom Cross is a nice 5 mid. Repel Strike is really a 6 mid, and you can change it to an off zone on face. And then you get access to some foundations. I found myself in the webcam regional. I was playing Mirio, and I found myself using You're So Obvious on offense a lot because it says return this attack to its printed speed. If it's a punch attack, it gets +2 damage. So if Eraserhead takes the speed down to 0, I can then use You're So Obvious, take it back to printed, and it gets the 2 damage. So I put this in my deck primarily for defense, but I was kind of shocked at how often I was using it for offense. All right, you could also tax Eraserhead's hand. On the good symbol, you really only get one option, Hardened Chop, and make Eraserhead use 2 cards to block this attack. You can grab momentum without dealing damage as Mirio. There's a lot of different ways on the good symbol. By the way, when I'm talking about Mirio today, I'm mainly talking about the good symbol. I know he's got good builds on Chaos and such, but I think he's undeniably the best on the good symbol. So I'm talking more about good Mirio lists. But we get Velocity Punch to add a foundation to our momentum. We get Capture Evildoers to steal momentum from our rival and get our own. We get Pull No Punches to clear our card pool, or we can play this Rejuvenating Smash and Raiding the Villain's Hideout combo, where we can discard a card with Raiding the Villain's Hideout for 2 damage, and then since we've discarded a card, get a momentum with Rejuvenating Smash. And Raiding the Villain's Hideout is a really good way to cash in on the card advantage that the good symbol gets. Okay, and then we want to keep our momentum, and the good symbol gives us a few ways to do this. We could use Card Pool to work, combine it with Velocity Punch. Velocity Punch, get the Card Pool to work that we have in our stage and put it in our momentum. And then if our rival tries to Instant Shining Flash us, we can just get our momentum right back. Or we could play this Hype Man, which I don't think has ever seen play in a regional before, but it could actually work here because it's playable while committed, and then you just flip it. You don't have to destroy it. And you can cancel anything that makes you discard your momentum. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mirio started sideboarding Hype Man. Okay, we can also cancel Erase, and there's a few different ways we can do this. We can do this with BMI Buster, which is probably the preferred way, where we can flip, remove 1 foundation, which isn't really a huge cost because it's in our card pool. And removing a foundation, we're just going to remove a committed foundation. So this is not a huge cost. And then we can cancel a ability on an action card. Or we can use evil versus good. But this would come at us taking out Capture Evildoers or putting maybe 1 or 2 in on the side. And then after your rival plays a non-character responsibility, cancel it. Now this stays in your card pool, which is kind of a bummer. But guess what? When you cancel Erase stays in Eraserhead's card pool, because the discarding the Erase is not part of the cost on the response. It's just part of the effect. So you cancel the effect, and you're going to clog Eraserhead's card pool as well, and then he can't go back and get his erases from his discard pile if he only has, 1 or 2 erases. Then this could be very, very powerful. But I think BMI Buster is probably the better way to do it, especially if you're playing a game plan that really works around this enhance of building and drawing. We could also get rid of Erase. These 2 are kind of silly. I just thought I'd put them in here. You could play Heroic Clash, which is a 3 mid attack, which Mirio loves 3 mid attacks. We get to make them low. And if you played this like as your 3rd attack and you got a momentum off Rejuvenating Smash, then you could use the Enhance. And if Eraserhead had blocked with a few erases, then both players remove all cards from their card pools, and you can remove, 2 erases from Eraserhead. But then you're playing a one check, and I don't think a deck with a, it's going to be very, very hard to be consistent enough using a deck with a one check to make top cuts. So you also get staggering positivity where you can give something damage, and then if they block it, you can shuffle back in Eraserhead's erases into his deck. But then again, this counts on these erases being in his discard pile and not in the card pool and not in his hand. And it's a 4 check, and it's a 2 diff foundation. So these are more just silly options, but thought I'd point them out. And then we're going to need heavy board control because we can't have Spooky and Tape. When we finally do get an opportunity to do damage on Eraserhead, we can't let Tape and Spooky and Unbreakable and these other foundations get in our way. So we have cards like Lost in Thought, where we can add those foundations back to Eraserhead's hand. We have To the Rescue, which I really like because it goes at response speed and not at enhanced speed. And then you can play it, just on your first attack and seal a foundation. And then Taiyaki Fanatic, you get, you can cancel an enhance ability on asset or foundation. The reason you would play Taiyaki Fanatic over Lost in Thought and To the Rescue is mainly just to get access to a Deadlock Enhance. Otherwise, I think I would rather be playing these two cards. Okay, and then you get sideboard into All Might 3. This is always an option, and I think probably a very good idea. All Might 3 punishes Eraserhead for having cards in hand. Eraserhead being a 19 health character, 7-hander, is going to want to be keeping lots of cards in hand for defense. And so we can, when Eraserhead takes away the speed, we can give the speed right back with All Might 3. And Eraserhead can't seal our character constantly, on every single attack. So eventually we're going to get this draw 2 cards off. 8 hand size, 30 health character. We can take down Eraserhead with All Might 3. The problem is that a lot of Mirio lists are very, very small, and they might not be 100% compatible to switch to All Might 3. Okay, let's talk about Overhaul for just a brief second. Overhaul is powerful against Mirio because he gets to block from his stage. So if he runs out of the zone that Mirio's been calling the entire game, he can always just take a face down and block with that. And then he's also powerful because he gets tons and tons of support on the earth and life symbols and evil symbol. Really on every single symbol of Overhauls, he gets lots of support to defeat Mirio. So he mainly gets Cooperation Offer, where we can flip, give it -3 speed, send it back to printed. I expect most Overhauls playing next week at Gen Con to be playing at least 2 of this in their main board, maybe 2 in the main board, 2 in the sideboard. They get access to Faith Shield. On Life Overhaul gets access to Faith Shield. Earth Overhaul gets access to Unbreakable. Oh, and Earth Overhaul gets access to Faith Shield. They both do. And then Life gets access to Wall Cling, and Earth gets access to Unbreakable. Basically the Earth version of Wall Cling, I suppose. And then they also get Evade and Copy, or Life Overhaul gets Evade and Copy, which sends it back to its printed speed and zone. And then both Life and Earth get Instant Shining Flash, and Earth also gets Bad Guy Roundup. So they can really tax the momentum from Mirio, and they have a lot of ways to not be punished by Mirio changing the zone of their attack. So what can we do against Overhaul? Against Overhaul, the board control is even more important. We have to be running some of these cards. We just do. We can't get so greedy that we pass these cards up. If you want to win the regional next weekend, you've got to be playing some amount of these, because you've got to turn off the Cooperation Offers and the Unbreakables and the Wall Clings. And then you can also play a few copies of Unrivaled Combatant, which again, I think is a necessity for any Mirio playing this next weekend. All right. And then Overhaul really wants to build into Deadlock and outbuild his opponent. So we can play the good cards that have Deadlock enhances, like Plummeting Punch, where we can lose a health, flip a foundation, commit a rival foundation, destroy a rival foundation. And this really jives well with the foundation Lemillion of the Big Three, because it starts out as a high, so we can give it a damage. Then we can use Mirio, change it to a mid. Then we can give it a speed with Lemillion of the Big Three. Then we can flip a foundation, give it 2 speed, make it a low, and then we can give it, and then it gets 2 damage to it, and you make it to a mid. And then when you make it to a low, you also give another damage. So it works really well with Lemillion of the Big Three, and I definitely could see this card finding play this next weekend. And then you get Pull No Punches, Practical Studies, the Big 3-year finish. These are just some of the really good Deadlock abilities that Good has access to. There's a lot more. Of course, we saw in the Oceanic Regional, it was good Mirio versus Earth Overhaul, and good Mirio, pull no punches, was the difference maker in having good Mirio take down the Oceanic RLE. The good punches, or the pull no punches, deadlock, enhance was the difference. Okay, and then against Overhaul, you could also sideboard into Toru too. I think this is a really good play for two reasons. The first reason is that it stops Overhaul from being able to ignore progressive on his turn. So when he says, I'm going to ignore progressive on my next card, and then he plays that attack, you can, of course, Toru and send it back to his hand. And Overhaul can fake you out on the first few turns, sure, where he's just unflipping his own foundations in his stage and he's just building out. But later in the game, that's very, very powerful. And then the other thing with Toru is that it really stops Faith Shield and Evade and Copy. Evade and Copy sends it back to its printed speed, but Toru adds to the block modifier of the card that the rival's trying to block with. So if the Overhaul has like 13 foundations, then they're blocking with a 6 mid when they block with Evade and Copy, or they're blocking with a 7 mid when they block with the Faith Shield. So after the game 1, when you play Overhaul, Overhaul will sideboard in Evade and Copy and Faith Shield. They just will. They always will, because they're going to be ready for the Mirio matchup. And then you sideboard in Toru. And then you flip over Toru, and they're going to be quite sad. All right. But all of this is to say, we don't want to forget who we are. We are Mirio. You know, there's a reason we're not playing All Might 3. We want to be a little more greedy, a little more aggressive, and, you know, so we want to still be Mirio. We don't want to take all of this advice, focus so hard on these two matchups that we just get clocked by the other matchups. You know, but we also don't want to be super, super greedy and just ignore these matchups. We need to find this nice, perfect spot in the middle. So you're Mirio, and don't forget that you're Mirio, and stick with your core game plan. And but just have a few things ready for these matchups. So, I forgot I included this. Here's just a little quote from Mark Cuban that I like. He says, "Just watch. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. When you try to take it too far, people turn the other way. I'm just telling you, when you've got a good thing and you get greedy, it always, 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 always turns on you. That's rule number 1 of business." Or in this case, that's rule number 1 of the My Hero Academia card game. So you want to get fat and not get slaughtered. You want to be a pig and not a hog. So what does that mean? That means you still want to be Mirio. You want to focus on your game plan. You do want to be a little bit greedy, but you don't want to be crazy greedy and just ignore these matchups and then just get clocked when people play answers. You don't want to just not have answers to their answers. So how would I update my Mirio list? I made top 16 at the webcam RLE a few weeks ago with Mirio, and there's a lot of updates that I would make. Fundamentally, my list was all about rejuvenating Smash with raiding the villain's hideout to get momentum, 4 capture evildoers to get momentum, Valiant Assault and Hardened Jab to draw cards like crazy. And that was really the list. I was playing it to the rescue of Lost in Thought, a few cheerleaders for defense, but on defense I was really relying on Mirio's face. And I had a good experience in the RLE, but I would make a lot of changes. So here's the changes I would make. I would take out Back Alley Haymaker. It honestly never felt that powerful as part of my lineup. And it was easily the one that I could take out. And I would replace it with 3 Hardened Chop, because Chop jives really well with Hardened Jab. And Chop is going to be good in the Eraser Head matchup, forcing him to discard his hand. So I would switch for Hardened Chop, plus we're already playing too many high blocks in this list, so it's nice to get a mid breaker block. I would throw in a calorie counter to punish blocking, and then I would throw in a plummeting punch for deadlock. And that's really the only changes I would make on the attack lineup. That might not seem like a big deal, but it is kind of a big deal. We're taking out our 4 Back Alley Haymaker, replacing it with 5 cards. I made it a little bit bigger of a list. I went from 52 cards to 54. I added in a Go for the Win, again, because it works really well with Hardened Jab, and we're trying to win the game early, and it's really nice to destroy a committed foundation and build 2 foundations in. The other things I would do is I would mainboard You're So Obvious. I found myself always siding this card in. It was always winning me games, and I would just definitely put 2 in. I would mainboard 2 Unrivaled Combatant. I would probably split I was 4xing Destined for Mainstream Success. I would probably split that with 2, the big 3. And I added in a few Keeping Aries safe. And that's really the only changes that I would make. That might not seem like a lot of changes, but it's going to make this list a lot more able to win all sorts of different matchups. This past list, this was a greedy list. There was no question I was being greedy. And this is a much more honest list, but we're still keeping the core engine of the game plan the same. And then I would sideboard All Might 3. If I was sideboarding in All Might 3 for Eraserhead, for example, I would take in the 3 BMI busters to cancel Erase. With those, I would replace Valiant Assault with the BMI buster. I might do a few Back Alley Haymaker and replace Phantom Threat with Haymaker, or I could just add in the Texas Smash for damage and the off zone. If I'm switching to Toru, then I'm definitely putting in the 2 Texas Smashes, and I'm going to 4 Texas Smash, because now I need more damage from my attacks, because I'm not putting on so many as from my character. And I would also put in my Back Alley Haymakers if I was switching to Toru. These 2 characters I feel like work with Back Alley Haymaker a lot better than Mirio does, which is surprising since normally you just start any Good Punches list out with 4x Back Alley Haymaker. But I honestly think it would stay on the sideline for me until I switch to a different good character, a more traditional good character. So those are the changes that I would make. I hope you enjoyed this run through of how a Mirio can overcome Eraserhead and Overhaul. There's still going to be tough matchups, but I do think that they're winnable, and Mirio does have answers. And we just need to put those answers in our sideboard. We need to mainboard some of them and then put the others in our sideboard. So like you can see, I listed a lot more answers in this video at the beginning than I actually ended up putting in my list. And that's because I'm staying Mirio. I'm staying with the core game plan of let's draw 1 million cards, let's turn our card advantage into damage, and let's get 1 million momentum. I'm sticking with the game plan. But also, let's just be a little more honest and ready for these matchups. I think Mirios that are not ready for Eraserhead and Overhaul, I do believe that they will be slaughtered. Maybe they'll make top cuts, but they'll be slaughtered once they get to top cuts. I mean, we already saw that with Mirio, right? We had 3 Eraserheads make top cuts, 2 Overhauls, and then only 1 Mirio of the 5 Mirios made it out of round 1. So we saw the Mirios get slaughtered in top cuts. And if you are planning to win the regional, we've got to be prepared. So I hope this, I'm beating a dead horse at this point, and I'm just rambling, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free, maybe I'm positive that I missed some answers that Mirio gets. So feel free to put in the comments some answers that you find, or some game plans that you think would make Mirio really powerful against these characters.